I never thought I would do something like this. The thought had lingered in the corners of my mind for months, maybe years, but I always brushed it away like a bad dream. A wife doesn't cheat on her husband. A woman like me, polished yet respected, restrained, doesn't sink into the kind of desperation that makes Hercule a number. Scribbled on a bathroom wall, and yet there I was lying across a bed too big for the loneliness it occupied. It waiting the hotel room smelled of fresh linen and cheap cologne, the kind they sprayed to mask something older something lived in. It wasn't my first time in a place like this, but it was the first time. I had come alone without my husband's hand possessively on my wasteless voice, ordering wine and mocking ice with the waitress just a little too long. I had told myself I needed this, that I deserved this. I had picked up my phone that afternoon, fingers trembling as I dialed the number. A low, indifferent voice had answered, businesslike and knowness. He had asked what I wanted. I had stumbled over my words. Someone Yunji had said, ashamed of how easily the word left my lips. Good look, strong, the voice on the other end, hadn't hesitated. Have someone, he'll be there at 8, and no, as the clock blinked 75:59, I sat at the edge of the bed, pressing my thighs, stog of their breath, shallow my silk robe, guilty. Indulgence I had bought just fortnight whispered against my skin. I felt expensive to knock. I swallowed hard, company called, my voice steadier than I felt. The door opened, and my world stopped. Hess stood in the doorway, backlit by Thelway's artificial glow, casting his fists in shadow broad shoulders. Dark dissolved hair, the kind of casual confidence that came naturally to mount, didn't know the burden of longing then. He stepped forward and the light hit his face. My breath caught. It was him, my stepson. My heart lurched so violently in my chest that for a moment he thought I might be sick. The air between us grew unbearably thick, fury of recognition crashing over both of us in suffocating ways. Stopped just inside the room, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that made my stomach twist. His eyes harp and unreadable locked onto me. In them, I saw the exact moment he realized what this was. Who I was, what he had only. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, pulsing with something dangerous, something neither of us was ready to name. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, feel the heat of humiliation creeping up my neck, but beneath that shame was something else, nothing darker, that coiled low and mischievous and refused to be ignored. He wasn't a boy anymore. I had now, and that of course had watched him grow from an awkward teenager into a man who moved through the world with some effortless charm as his father, but he had never seen him like this, never standing in front of me with an aura of quiet confidence, with the kind of presence that made my pulse skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Still, I had to end this now before the situation spiraled into something I called Nintendo. This was a mistake. I forced out my voice barely above a whisper, but the words felt empty. Even to me, his lips parted as if he might say something, but instead he exhaled slowly and took a step closer. My entire body tensed, not in fear, but in something far more dangerous. Air shifted, carrying his scent. Clean, masculine, unfamiliar in the most unsettling way. His gaze flickered over him, taking in the silk robe, the flesh on me skin, the undeniable evidence of my intent. There was no judgment in his expression, no horror or disgust, only a slow, quiet understanding that made my breath hitch. He tilted his head, slightly studying me, like he was seeing me for the first time. Did you know it would be me? Finally asked, his voice low, and even though there was something beneath it, something taut and electric. No, I admitted, because lying would be pointless. Something unreadable flashed in his eyes, something too quick for me to decipher, but whatever it was, it sent a shiver down my spine for a moment. I thought he might turn and walk away, that this night would dissolve into something would never speak of again, but then he moved, slow, deliberate, closing the space between us in a way that made my breath catch in my throat. I should have stepped back. I should have said something, anything to stop this before it became irreversible, but my body betrayed me. My feet remaining planted, Ash reached out, fingers barely brushing the edge of my robe, a single touch feather light, and yet it sent a ripple of something forbidden straight through my pulse. Pounded. I didn't move, neither did Hebu. The air between us had already shifted into something that couldn't beam down. The distance between us had vanished, replaced by something thick and unspoken. A charge in the air that neither of us dared acknowledge, but neither of us could ignore. His fingertips barely grazing the silk at Miss Holder, remained there, unmoving yet thievy within tenth the room. Felt impossibly small, the air too warm my own skin too. Sensitive beneath the sheer fabric of my robe, I swallowed, followed, but it did nothing to steady me. You should go, I whispered. Though my voice lacked the conviction it should have carried high sighs, didn't leave mine dark and unreadable, holding me in place. Far more effectively than his touch, do you want me? The question came low, steady. An invitation wrapped in a challenge, and something in my stomach clenched at the way. He said it measured, careful. Though mistakenly certain he should have said yes. I should. Have we ended this before unraveled into something neither of us could take back but the weight of his gaze? Pressed against me, pulling something to the surface that I'd spent years pretending didn't exist, a craving, a hunger I had ignored for so long. That now, when faced with it, I felt powerless against it. His fingers trailed down the edge of my sleeve, barely a whisper of contact, but the heat of it burned through me. He was watching me closely, noting the way me breath hitched, how my chest rose just a fraction higher, how my lips parted, but no words came. He saw everything and hadn't look away, a slow exhale, escapade and shaky and uneven, and it was all themes where he knew the hesitation between us shattered like fragile glass, and in its place was something reckless, something undeniable. His hand, once hesitant, moved with purpose, now fingers grazing the delicate nude at my waist, tugging at it just enough to make me pulse pound between my ribs. I felt weightless, drowning in the tension that coiled between us two, aware of his breath ghosting over my cheek, the heat radiating from his skin. I should stop this. I should pull away, but I didn't. Instead, my hands moved on, their own fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, anchoring myself to him. As the last thread of restraint between us unraveled, his breath warmed my skin, each exhale slow unraveling of restraint, his presence of gravity. I couldn't resist. My fingers tightened in the fabric of his hurt, not to push him away, but to hold him there, to steady myself against the storm building between us. The silk of my robe loosened, slipping from my shoulder, and his gaze followed the movement. Dark and unreal, he wasn't just looking, he was memorizing, drinking in beside me as I've committing it to something deeper than memory. His hand warm and steady skimmed the newly exposed skin of my arm, a touch so light it sent a shiver rippling through. I exhaled shakily, knowing I should pull away, but every second we stood this close pushed us further into something irreversible. But I didn't move. Didn't want to. His fingers brushed lower, ghosting along my waist, tentative yet asserting boundaries. Neither of us should, crossing my breath, hitched at the heat of his palm against my bare skin. Sheer intimacy of it unraveling me for more than if he had grabbed Maruli's lips parted, and for a moment he thought he would speak, but he didn't. Simply watched me, waiting a skin without words. I tilted my head, surrendering where I could stop myself. That was all it took. His grip tightened, pulling the closer, and I felt him solid, burning fluid of his body pressing into mine, as if he had finally let go of their restraint, holding him back. His lips barely grazed my collarbone, a feather touch that sent a pulse of heat straight through. I gasped at the sensation, my fingers grilling against his chest, every nerve in my body alive with reckless, unspoken. He groaned softly at my reaction, his breath hot against my skin, and the sound of it sent a shudder through me. My stomach tightening with something I could no longer deny. His hands traced up my sides, not deliberate, mapping out a path he had no right to take, but one I wouldn't stop him from following. His hands traveled higher, grazing the delicate slope of Miss Holder's, the barest touch, yet it sent a shock wave through me. My robe hung loosely, now clinging only by gravity, as if waiting for one last movement to fall away completely. His fingers stressed the path of exposed skin, slow to liberate. His touch featheral but firm enough to make my breath itch. I could feel the tension in him, the restraint, wearing with something deeper. Something darker. It was in the way. His fingers trembled slightly as they moved in the sharp inhale he took when I arched. However, faintly into his touch, every fiber of my being screamed at that. This was wrong, but my body betrayed and drawn to him in a way that felt inevitable. His breath ghosted over my collarbone, his lips hovering just above me, skin close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, my hand still clutching at his shirt loosened their grip, sliding upward until my fingers found the bare skin at the back of his neck. He shuddered under my touch, a quiet, restrained sound escaping his throat, and something about it, about his unraveling, ignited a danger-kind satisfaction in my robe, slipped further, sliding down me arms, pulling at the bend of my elbows. Just eyes dropped following its descent. The raw hunger I saw there sent a pulse of heat straight through me. He wasn't just looking, he was devouring, his gaze mapping every inch of skin now beat to him. I should have felt shame, guilt, some semblance of resistance, but all I felt was the sharp, unyielded pull of desire. His hands found me waist-strong and warm fingers pressing into the soft curve of my sedesis if he needed to anchor himself to ground us both before we fell completely libet. We were already falling slowly, deliberately. He leaned in, his lips grazing the side of my throat, not quite a kiss, but the suggestion of phone, a tease that sent a violent shiver through me. My body reacted before I could think, my fingers tangling into his share, pulling him closer as my head tipped back, offering more. A ragged breath escaped him hot against my skin, his hands gripping tighter as though he were teetering on the edge of something dangerous. And then he broke, his lips crashed against my neck, a desperate, heated press of mouth against skin, his restraint shattering in an instant. I gasped at the sensation, the sheer intensity of it, sending a rush of warmth cascading through me. His teeth scraped lightly along the sensitive nerve of my throat, his tongue soothing the path immediately after, and I moaned unable to stop the sound from escaping us. Hands were everywhere now, tracing, exploring, memorizing. He pressed closer, his body a furnace against mine. It melted into him, into the fire of a tall nothing else existed, not the past, not the consequences. His hands moved with an unspoken certainty now, as if he had been waiting for this moment far longer than either of us were willing to admit. His fingertips traced slow, teasing linens along my waist, barely there, yet leaving a trail of fire in their wake. I shivered under his touch, a soft gasp slipping from my lips before I could stop it. Andy felt the way his body tensed in response, as if my every reaction was something he needed, something he craved. Arched against him, instinct taking over, and his grip tightened, fingers pressing into my skin with just enough pressure to make me feel it, to make me want more. His breath was hot against my neck, each exhale sending a fresh wave of anticipation through me, each second stretching unbearably between us, charged with something we could no longer resist. I barely had time to register the way his lips moved lower, grazing along my collarbone before his mouth opened it against my skin, tongue flicking in a slow, deliberate emotion that sent a shudder through me. My hands moved on their own, fingers slipping beneath the fabric of his shirt, finding the heat of his bare skin. The taut muscles beneath, he groaned softly at the contact, the sound vibrating against my throat, and something a booth way he reacted to my touch made my pulses stutter. He wanted this as badly as I did. His hands slid up my sides, taking the loose silk of my robe with them, his fingers brushing the bare curve of my back, the feeling of it of his tush against my skin was intoxicating warm while in a way that made my head spin. I felt the warmth of his mouth traveling lower, exploring with a slow and hurried hunger, his tongue tracing delicate patterns that made my breath catch every touch. Every flicker of warmth against my skin sent inothermic pulse of heat through me, pulling deep in me stomach, making it impossible to think about anything but this. His hands, his mouth, way he was learning my body with every passing second. I pulled him closer, pressing myself against him, and he let out a low guttural sound, his grip on me tightening us. Though he needed me just as much as I needed him, my robe slipped further, caught at my elbows, the last barrier between us hanging by a thread, waiting for the inevitable. His lips broke, rushed against me shoulder, a slow, lingering kiss that sent a shiver down my spine, and then, hestled for a moment, the world seemed to stop. His breath, heavy and uneven, fainted against my skin, his fingers curled against my waist, holding me there, but hadn't moved. I felt it. Then the weight of reality crashing over us, his forehead dropped to my shoulder, his body still pressed against mine, as if he couldn't bear to let go, but knew that if we took one more step there would be no turning back. His breathing was ragged, his fingers twitching against me skin, and I knew he was fighting some battle raging inside me. I closed my eyes, swallowing against the tightness in my throat. His breath hitched as his fingers finally claimed the bare skin at me, waist rough, palms sliding over the curve of my hips like he had been holding himself back for too long. A sharp exhale left me as he pulled my flesh against him, the heat of his body searing into mine, no space left, no hesitation remaining his mouth found Mithra open, searching, dragging fire in its wake as his teeth grazed. My skin notch until not tentative, but with the kinned-off need that shattered restraint, I gasped nails. Digging into his shoulders and coring myself as my head. Tipped back, surrendering my breath, coming in uneventful disparate waves. Then, without warning, Hell lifted me, affirmed, commanding. Grip Armstrong as he turned, pressing me against. Cool surface of the wall. The contrast of heat and cold sent a shudder through me, my legs instinctively lightened. Around him as he pressed forward deeper into the space where no doubt, no hesitation, no turning back existed anymore, he pulled back just now. To meet my eyes, his pupils, blown wide chest, rising hard against mine, Anthony came.